That's for everybody. Every human being will come in before Allah on Judgment Day. But those nations have to pay a price in this world. They get annihilated in this world before they pay a price in the next world. And that is part of the, you can call this the collective punishment. So individually in the Quran, every individual, you and me and everybody else, is going to come in front of Allah individually. كُلُّهُمْ أَتِيهِ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ فَرْدًا. Allah says every one of them will come in front of Allah alone. So I have to go alone, you have to go alone, every one of us has to go alone. But there's another system of Allah, another system of justice of Allah, and that system of justice is for nations. And those nations that get a messenger, and then they reject that messenger, and they mock Allah and the ayat of Allah, and they receive a miracle, and they reject that miracle, Allah doesn't just deal with them on Judgment Day, He deals with them in this life too. And this is one of the most repeated lessons in the Meccan Quran. The Meccan Quran. This is Surah At-Talaq, the Surah of divorce. And after 7 ayat giving Muslims instructions on how to do the divorce, then Allah says, وَكَأَيٍّ مِّن قَرْيَةٍ عَتَتْ عَنْ أَمْرِ رَبِّهَا وَرُسُلِهِ فَحَاسَبْنَاهَا حِسَابًا شَدِيدًا وَعَذَّبْنَاهَا عَذَابًا نُكْرًا. He says, and how many nations have there been that arrogantly disobeyed the instructions of their master and arrogantly disobeyed their prophets? Then Allah gave them intense punishment, and Allah held them to account and gave them intense punishment, and they tasted the consequences of their deeds, meaning in history, they already tasted the consequences of their deeds, and then there's the next taste coming, which is Judgment Day. Allah mentioned this, not in the Meccan Quran, now He's mentioning this in Madani Quran, Surah At-Talaq. In order to step back and understand something, let's understand one thing about the word utu. Utu in Arabic is a little bit different from isyan. Isyan means disobedience. Isyan, disobedience. Utu actually means disobedience with defiance. So there's an element of kibr in utu. So to put it simply, Allah warns about a nation that doesn't just disobey Allah, they do utu. They get arrogant. And then Allah punishes them, not in the next life, in this life. And He's warning the Muslims of this. So when I was studying this a couple of months ago with my team, I started wondering, Allah collectively, He destroys nations. And He says things like, فَهَلْ تَرَى لَهُم مِّن بَاقِيَةٍ. Is there even a single individual left? Nobody's left. Nobody left alive. But Allah has another rule. And the other rule of Allah is what happens when Muslims disobey Allah. Okay, those stories are about when non-Muslims refuse to obey Allah and the Messenger. But does Allah also have a rule for when Muslims in the hundreds, in the thousands, in the millions, if Muslims start disobeying Allah, does He have a rule for that too? And the example we have for that in the Quran before us is the example of Banu Israel. Banu Israel were the Muslims before us. They were given a book, they were given prophets, they accepted those prophets, they believed in those prophets, they believed in that book, they identified themselves as people of revelation, and yet Allah says they disobeyed Allah. So what did Allah do with them? Let me read this to you from Surah Al-A'raf. Just so you understand, how does Allah deal with a Muslim nation that disobeys Allah? Okay, because He's already explained in Meccan Quran how He deals with disobedient nations outside of Islam. This is now inside of Islam. فَلَمَّا عَتَوْا عَمَّا نُهُوا عَنْهُ. When they arrogantly disobeyed, utu again. This is talking about the Israelites. When they arrogantly disobeyed against the things, or about the things they were told not to do. قُلْنَا لَهُمْ كُونُوا قِرَدَةً خَاسِئِينَ. We told them, become monkeys, rejected, apes. Now you could think this is biological apes, but there's something else going on here. You know how apes behave? Apes are some of the most violent animals on the planet. And apes can turn violent without warning. And they become extremely violent even against each other. You could have apes that get along for many years, and one day, one gets pushed by the other and he beats the other one to death. And the other ones join in and beat and cannibalize their own. They'll eat their opponent's face. His own brother will eat his face. When apes will see some food or something, they will attack. They won't care who it belongs to or if it's dangerous. They just attack. And they act like a herd. They don't think for themselves. If one is doing it, they all start doing it. So you'll become these impulsive, herd-minded people that'll just not even think for yourselves. You'll act like apes. You'll start beating on each other, fighting each other, killing each other. This is what you will become. This is one punishment. But Allah is not done. وَإِذْ تَأَذَّنَ رَبُّكَ لَيَبْعَثَنَّ عَلَيْهِمْ إِلَى يَوْمِ الْقِيَامَةِ مَنْ يَسُومُهُمْ سُوءَ الْعَذَابِ إِنَّ رَبَّكَ لَسَرِيعُ الْعِقَابِ وَإِنَّهُ لَغَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. And Allah said, until the day of judgment, people will keep coming that will keep having power over them. Allah will keep putting other nations, making them more powerful over the Muslims, that will humiliate the Muslims with the worst kind of punishments and the worst kind of tortures over and over again. And at the end of it, Allah says, and Allah is very quick to take vengeance, but Allah is also forgiving. Meaning if Allah wanted, He could destroy a nation immediately. He doesn't have to put someone through centuries of humiliation. He could just finish them right away. لَيَأْتِيَنَّهُمْ بَغْتَةً, like other nations. Allah, but these people are being given slow, painful humiliation because hopefully that will wake them up. Hopefully this will be enough for them to make tawbah and say, okay, no more disobedience to Allah. And so Allah at the end of that said, and if they do make tawbah, there's ishara, وَإِنَّهُ لَغَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. And certainly He's forgiving, loving and caring too. He's not just punishing. Then even another punishment for the Muslim nation that disobeys Allah. He says, وَقَطَّعْنَاهُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ أُمَمًا. We broke them up into multiple mini nations in the land. They're no longer one ummah. They are multiple smaller nations. And you might think, oh, this must mean they got broken into different countries. They got broken into different. Pakistan is a Muslim country. Afghanistan is a Muslim country. Bangladesh is a Muslim country. But they have their own national interests, right? The Indonesians have their own national interests. The Malaysians have their own national interests. You can have the Algerians and the Tunisians and the Moroccans and the Jordanians and the Syrians, but they're all their own nations. They have their own interests. They have their own agendas. Even if they have family ties across from each other, you can have, tensions between families in the Gulf that live, some of them in Bahrain, some in Qatar, some in Kuwait, some in Saudi, some in Yemen. They all have family ties, but the politics are difficult and you have no-fly zones and you have all kinds of stuff going on. Sometimes that happens. That's one way to look at it. Here's another way to look at it. Even within the same country. Oh, which city? You're from Islamabad? Oh, you're from Karachi? Oh, these Karachi people, man. What do you speak? Sylheti or Bangla? Which one do you speak? Are you like Malay or are you Indian Malay? قَطَّعْنَاهُمْ أُمَمًا. You see, these are my people. Those are those people. Those are those people. Those are those people. This is what Allah did with the nation before us. وَقَطَّعْنَاهُمْ أُمَمًا قَطَّعْنَاهُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ أُمَمًا مِنْهُمُ الصَّالِحُونَ وَمِنْهُمْ دُونَ ذَلِكَ. Among them are good and among them not so good. Other than that too. وَبَلَوْنَاهُمْ بِالْحَسَنَاتِ وَالسَّيِّئَاتِ لَعَلَّهُمْ يَرْجِعُونَ. We tested them with good and bad, so hopefully they can come back. Then this is the last of these punishments. فَخَلَفَ مِنْ بَعْدِهِمْ خَلْفٌ. Then a new generation took after them that wasn't very good. A useless generation came up. A powerless generation. A backwards generation took over. وَرِثُوا الْكِتَابِ. The first description of that generation is they inherited the book. They weren't Muslim because they believe it. They're Muslim because mom and dad were Muslim. That's why I have it. Why are you Muslim? Oh, my mom, my dad. That's why we're Muslim. They have no knowledge of the book themselves. They just got it passed down in inheritance. وَرِثُوا الْكِتَابِ يَأْخُذُونَ عَرَضَ هَذَا الْأَدْنَى. They become extremely materialistic. They have the religion, but their real religion is money and house and fame and attention and social power, political. That's what they love. They love this world, this lower life. They don't care about the next life. The book is there, but the book is sitting on the shelf. What's in front of them, front and center all the time, is material benefit in some way. And Allah says, He adds, وَيَقُولُونَ سَيُغْفَرُ لَنَا. And on top of ignoring Allah's book and being materialistic, they have the audacity. They're so courageous in their ignorance. You know what they say? Of course we'll be forgiven. I mean, we're the ummah after all. We should be forgiven. Who else has these kuffar are not going to be forgiven? What, is Allah going to punish us? No. We are the chosen ummah of Allah. We are the ones. We're ummatul Islam. سَيُغْفَرُ لَنَا. And then, if that wasn't enough, Allah says, He says, وَإِنْ يَأْتِهِمْ عَرَضٌ مِثْلُهُ يَأْخُذُوهُ. This is a really interesting phrase. Allah says, if they have all the money in the world, and then they had the offer to get double of that, you would think, okay, I have enough. No, thank you. No. They would run after that too. And Allah questions them, أَلَمْ يُؤْخَذَ عَلَيْهِمْ مِيثَاقُ الْكِتَابَ أَلَّا يَقُولُوا عَلَى اللَّهِ إِلَّا الْحَقِّ. Wasn't the promise of Allah taken from them that they will not speak anything but the haqq? And وَدَرَسُوا مَا فِيهِ, and they're going to study what's in the book. وَالدَّارُ الْآخِرَةُ أَخَيْرٌ لِلَّذِينَ يَتَّقُونَ أَفَلَا يَعْقِلُونَ, أو أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ actually. And the final home is better for those who have taqwa. May Allah make us of them. Talaq. The last thing I want to share with you in these couple of minutes is what is the subject of Surah Al-Talaq. You may have heard the word hudud before. Hudud is the limits set by Allah. The word had actually originally refers to a fence or a border. That's the had of something. The animal doesn't cross the fence. Allah in His laws has set some fences and said to the Muslims, stay inside this fence. And whoever crosses this fence is in trouble with Allah. Either you've done wrong to yourself, وَمَن يَتَعَدَّ حُدُودَ اللَّهِ فَقَدْ ظَلَمَ نَفْسَهُ. Whoever crosses these limits that are set by Allah, they're doing wrong to themselves. Now listen to this. I just want, we could talk about all of the hudud, we're just going to talk about the one that's in this surah, in Surah Al-Talaq. Take her away. The first thing Allah said is, وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ رَبَّكُمْ لَا تُخْرِجُوهُنَّ مِنْ بُيُوتِهِنَّ. Have taqwa of Allah, your Rabb. Don't expel them from their homes. Don't expel them from their homes. And they shouldn't leave. And then He said, and these are the hudud of Allah. And what is the common? This is the most common thing. And we say, oh, we want the hudud of Allah. We want to abide by the sharia of Allah. When Allah says His hudud, we say, come take your daughter. Get out of my house. Get out of my house. How many millions of women, where am I going to go? I have small children. How am I going to pay for them? And Allah made the expense of the child a responsibility of the man in the Quran exclusively. Exclusively. The children's support, child support, is exclusively the man's responsibility. Explicit. These are from the hudud of Allah. Okay, if one person breaks this rule, okay, maybe that's just one person who's sinful, and you're in your family and you don't say anything. So you know when you don't say anything, وَفِيكُمْ سَمَّعُونَ لَهُمْ وَاللَّهُ عَلِيمٌ بِالظَّالِمِينَ. You're listening to it happen, you're watching it happen, but you're not saying anything. Allah knows all the wrongdoers. The one who does it and the one who watches is like a spectator. Can't say anything to my uncle. Can't say anything to my older brother. He's my older brother, etc., etc. We do this all the time. And the point I'm trying to make to you is if enough of us do this, if enough Muslims break the law of Allah, this limit set by Allah, and we're proud to do it too, we're being a real man about it too, we do utu, then Allah has a formula. Allah has a rule. When you do this enough times, I will make you fight each other and kill each other. I will break you up into multiple nations. I will have other people have more power over you, and they will humiliate you in the worst, most possible ways. You will have a generation of Muslims, new generation of Muslims, who won't even know why they're Muslim. They just got Islam in inheritance. They'll become extremely materialistic. All they will care about is money, looks, pleasure. That's all they'll care about. And it will never be enough for them. And they won't ever be learning and studying the book of Allah or the deen of Allah. That won't happen. This will be a punishment Allah will give to those who openly, in enough numbers, disobey Allah. So now our reading, well, why would Sahaba be warned that nations were punished before you? This is the last ayah I'm leaving you with. My time's up. He says, أَعَدَّ اللَّهُ لَهُمْ عَذَابًا شَدِيدًا فاتقوا الله يا أولي الألباب الذين آمنوا قد أنزل الله إليكم ذكرًا. He says Allah punished those nations, Salih, Shu'aib, those nations, Ad, Thamud, those nations. He says Allah gave them intense punishment. Therefore, you have taqwa of Allah, people of good minds that have actually come to believe. Allah has sent a reminder especially to you. Allah is reminding you through them. All this time we thought Allah is reminding Quraysh through them. And now Allah is reminding you and me through them. There's a sunnah of Allah of collective punishment. I pray that Allah does not make us of those worthy of collective punishment, nor of individual punishment. I pray to Allah that even within our own families, within our own circles, when we see wrongdoing happen and an open violation of the hudud of Allah going on, that we put a stop to it. We stand by. Allah describes us as وَالْحَافِظُونَ لِحُدُودِ اللَّهِ. Those who guard the limits set by Allah. That means I have to not cross those lines, but if people I love are crossing those lines, I pull them back too and say, no, we don't do that. We don't do that. I have to guard. That's what it means to guard the fence. So I pray that Allah makes us of those who guard the limits set by Allah, especially when it comes to our families, especially when it comes to our own our own circles. May Allah Azza wa Jal accept our tawbah and our mistakes and make us transform our behavior so we don't become people that get Allah's iqab, but we get Allah's maghfirah and Allah's rahmah, His forgiveness and His loving care. Barakallahu li wa lakum fil Qur'an al-Hakim wa nafa'ani wa iyyakum bil ayati wa dhikr al-Hakim.